like when you guys opened up for staking. So do you see interest kind of like going down a little bit, like people that were interested have already staked, or like every time you open a new cap, is it filling up just as quickly? Do you see the interest kind of staying the same and people waiting for the next round to open up? The second cap also filled up in like an hour and a half. As soon as it opened, people were waiting to stake. Was there like a gas war when people were trying to stake? Did you see any like crazy rates that people were paying to try to get in? If Bitcoin is the one securing it anyways, then what happens to like proof of stake tokens? Does that at some point, do you see a point where they're not really necessary anymore if you can just build another ecosystem, another chain, and you can secure it with Bitcoin? First of all, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you on the show. David, how are you doing today?
Very good. How are you, Doris?
I'm doing pretty well. It's towards the end of the day on a Friday for me, so the weekend's about to begin, and I'm feeling good. So I wanted to start off with a quick introduction about who you are, what you do in the space. I know people that are familiar with Babylon and with the ecosystem in general probably already know. But a lot of our listeners are newer to the space and are really looking for more of a background story of how you got into blockchain and cryptocurrency. You have a very impressive background, so I'll let you take it from here and kind of tell us what got you interested in working in the blockchain ecosystem and what you were doing before this that led you into this landscape.
Yeah, so sure. So I have been a faculty member at first at Berkeley, and then more recently at Stanford. So in my past life, before blockchain, I used to do research in wireless communication. So quite a few of my research ideas got into wireless standards, starting with the third generation, fourth generation, and fifth generation. So everybody who uses a phone actually uses some of my technology. Proud to say. So around 2018, the wireless area has become quite mature. Well, when the technology is in the hands of every single individual on Earth, then I think it's time to move on for a researcher. And researchers are always looking for new areas to do research in. And I find blockchain a very exciting new area. 2018, that was a time when Bitcoin reached 20,000. I still remember that day when Bitcoin reached 20,000. There was a lot of excitement. Of course, looking back, 20,000 seems to be a very mild number. But in those days,
that would be a very sad day right now.
In those days, 20,000 was like a huge deal. And around that time, I got into the area. I read Nakamoto's white paper, really fascinated by this research area. I'm basically an infrastructure guy, so I've been focusing on doing blockchain infrastructure research, protocols, consensus protocols, how to improve Bitcoin. And my research journey has something to do with Babylon, so maybe I can say a few words about the research journey within blockchain. So I started with trying to solve the problem of scalability of Bitcoin. As everyone knows, Bitcoin is a very secure protocol, but very slow. And my goal was how to increase the speed of Bitcoin, both in terms of speeding up the confirmation as well as increasing the throughput of Bitcoin. So we actually wrote a very nice paper, I think, our first paper in blockchain. But then we realized that nobody cared. Nobody cared. And the reason is because at that time, everyone from a research and from an infrastructure building point of view lost interest in Bitcoin at that point, because people think that there's no way you can build on Bitcoin. So everyone moved on to build altcoins, starting with Ethereum and then Solana, Polkadot, Cosmos, now there's Sway and Aptos and so forth. All these are new projects. They all have this characteristic that they're all proof of stake. So in 2019, when we started doing research, we thought Bitcoin was the thing. We're so naive because we just entered that field. But in fact, everyone has shifted to proof of stake already. And so we follow that. And at that time, Ethereum was about to transition from proof of work to proof of stake. And so we got hold of the earlier version of the protocol written by Vitalik and his collaborator. And we find something interesting. We find that this protocol is actually not secure, the one they propose. And so we find a few specific attacks on the protocol, which we alert the Ethereum Foundation team. And that began a very fruitful collaboration in which we worked with them to...
You're referring to the proof of stake implementation that they were going to transition to?
That's right. So they wrote a paper on the protocol, the Ethereum proof of stake protocol. And then we discovered that there were some attacks, and we worked with them to fix them. That was the year before the merge. And so we gained quite a lot of experience working with proof of stake protocol by working with Ethereum Foundation. And so the Babylon project sort of came out from sort of this whole host of ideas, which is, Bitcoin is very secure, but nobody cares about it. Proof of stake is newer, but there are lots of security issues because it's so new. And so our idea was, is there a way to connect Bitcoin with proof of stake to make even more secure protocols? In other words, use Bitcoin to complement the strength of proof of stake protocol to become a stronger security. So that's sort of how Babylon was conceived, as combining the security of the two ecosystems. Now, what's interesting is that Babylon was founded about 3.5 years ago by me and a bunch of consensus researchers and engineers. What has evolved in Babylon, though, is that now it's gone beyond just the problem of combining the security of Bitcoin and proof of stake. It has elevated to, in some sense, combine the economy, the Bitcoin economy, and the proof of stake economy. So security is like a foundational thing, but it is not a customer-facing thing. Customers don't see security. Of course, it's a basic. But what customers see is liquidity, is the economy, is the Bitcoin the asset, proof of stake the asset, ETH the asset, right? So what we ended up doing, or evolved our project, is sort of the shift from going from pure security project to a project that now goes to a higher layer of combining these two ecosystems, Bitcoin ecosystem and proof of stake ecosystem. So the thesis of the project is still combining the two worlds, but now the combination is beyond just a level of security to liquidity.
Yeah, actually. So, that kind of makes sense, right? When you first think about Babylon as the core, for me, it was always like a core solution to securing external proof of stake ecosystems using the latent liquidity of Bitcoin. People are just sitting on Bitcoin. They don't want to let go of it. They want to stay in control of it, but they're willing to at least stake it if it's just providing security for something else, and they know they're still in control. They can unstake it when they need. So it's really providing that economic level of security. It's an economic security layer that can be utilized by, for example, Ethereum or other proof of stake blockchain ecosystems. So like, it's at its core, it is really sharing like security, but it's also it's giving the security aspect by sharing the liquidity, by sharing access to the value that's locked on Bitcoin itself, which is a very interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, that's one thing interesting about the proof of stake security model, is that proof of work is a security model. That was the first security model, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Proof of stake is the evolution of the proof of work to a new security model. But what people didn't realize when they first invented proof of stake is that actually proof of stake has intrinsically the asset involved. And so once it becomes the asset involved, it becomes a financial instrument in addition to a security model. Whereas proof of work doesn't have this characteristic. And that's what makes proof of stake so interesting, I think.
And I think I like the original model. So I actually have a question for you, and this you may not want to answer this. But I remember when people first started talking about proof of work being phased out because it was so inefficient and it just used too much power and energy. And I always got the sense that that was more of a talking point for people that opted for more centralized ways of securing protocols. So like proof of stake can be controlled by whoever has the most stake, whoever has the most economic backing to be able to purchase the underlying tokens and be able to stake it, right? So to me, that just sounds like a fast way to centralization and to kind of move away from the original ethos of Bitcoin and blockchains and what this space was designed to be. Like the whole cypherpunk movement was the core that drove this industry, and now we're moving to proof of stake, and it's energy and efficiency that's kind of being used as a guise to get people to move to a more centralized and controllable method of consensus. Then I don't know, maybe that's just me and my conspiracy theory brain thinking, but that's kind of what it seems like. And at least it does open up the door for that, for more centralization and centralized control over these ecosystems. So I really, that's one thing that I do also really respect about what Babylon is doing, is it's kind of taking that us a little bit closer back to that core ethos of using Bitcoin, using a more decentralized asset as the economic security layer for these proof of stake chains and ecosystems. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, is it my conspiracy theory brain, or does that make sense? Does that track in terms of logic?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense because the thing about Bitcoin, right, as an asset, is everybody owns some Bitcoin. And so therefore using it as a staking asset means anybody can participate in the staking of a blockchain. So, in proof of stake blockchain, typically when you launch a new token, that new token is actually under the control of rather few parties, at least in the beginning. So it will take a long time to decentralize this asset. And for a lot of blockchains, it never does, never happens.
If ever.
If ever. And so I think Ethereum has a distinction that it started with a proof of work model. So the asset is already quite decentralized when it transitions into a proof of stake. But other blockchains do not have this history. So allowing Bitcoin staking to kind of bootstrap the security of a chain provides this decentralization advantage. In some sense, just talking to you just came to my mind. The analogy is basically saying that it gives any new proof of stake system the journey of Ethereum, because Ethereum started with proof of work. And so by giving Bitcoin staking to these chains, other proof of stake chains can enjoy this Ethereum history.
Same level, yeah. That's very true. Now, how many I don't want to say how many, but like what's the interest been like for BSNs or for like Bitcoin secured networks, Babylon aligned networks?
Yeah, so right now we have been discussing with many chains, and we're shooting to launch the first cohort of around, I would say, between 5 to 10 chains by the end of this year. BSNs,
Okay.
Bitcoin Secure Network. Actually, now we have a little bit newer name to it. It's called Bitcoin Supercharged Network. Same acronym, BSNs, but just to emphasize the fact that we are not only giving just security to these networks, but also liquidity to these networks.
Okay, that's awesome. That's actually really good to hear, because I know, I mean, we've worked with a company called TAC that's pushing to be one of the first BSNs. I mean,
Yes, exactly.
I'm a big fan of Bitcoin in general, but seeing people utilize it for something a little bit more unique and innovative, and not having to focus as much on the economic security and having a good trusted asset. Like everybody loves Bitcoin, and so if I can use Bitcoin to help me secure the app chain I'm building or this ecosystem that I'm building, just I feel like it opens up a whole new world of opportunities for people that now can kind of let go of that one big fear of securing their ecosystem and how to do it. Like there's a very unique option using a native asset that they actually trust and have trusted for years. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm excited to see.
what we found is that there's actually a good analogy, synergy between security and liquidity, right? If the chain wants Bitcoin liquidity, then they better be secure because Bitcoiners are very conservative. They don't want to give
Yeah.
the token, send some token to some random chain, and then get hacked, and then they lose the token. And what's better for give confidence to Bitcoiners than giving Bitcoin security to that chain?
Yeah. Have you seen? I mean, like the caps filled up really, really quick for like when you guys opened up for staking. So, do you see interest kind of like going down a little bit? Like people that were interested have already staked, or like every time you open a new cap, is it just is it filling up just as quickly? Do you see interest kind of staying the same and people waiting for the next round to open up? Like what does that look like in terms of like ongoing interest?
So right now we have about 50,000 Bitcoin staked on the Babylon protocol.
Okay.
And at today's price, I don't know what today's Bitcoin price. I haven't checked yet.
Yeah, I think we're like
I think
105 today.
this is northward of 5 billion. Northward of 5 billion. And if you
Wow.
look at that number, then I think we're at about 8th or 9th or 10th around there of chains, proof of stake chains, with the most economic security.
Wow.
Top 10 chain.
Easy.
So that's a huge amount of security right now, a huge amount of security. And right now it's only securing one chain, which is the Babylon Genesis chain, so which we just launched about a month and a half ago. And so we expect that this number will continue to grow as we launch more chains which will share this security. And that's what we're anticipating happening. But right now we're already at 50,000 Bitcoin, so that's quite a bit.
That is quite a bit. I think there's been 3 caps so far, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if you're able to talk about it, but do you see any new rounds opening up for more holders to stake their Bitcoin?
So right now the staking has no cap anymore. So those caps,
it's fully open.
those three caps were in phase 1 when there was no Babylon Genesis chain. In phase 2, in Babylon Genesis chain, we have launched about a month and a half ago, and then we started permissionless staking about a month ago, end of April time frame. And right now, everyone is free to stake, just like proof of stake. Any proof of stake protocol, right?
Yeah.
People are free to stake. And
you can
this
just
is
stake.
right now Babylon Genesis. Yeah, anybody can stake. So there are people
that's
staking,
awesome.
there are people unbonding. So right now it's 50,000 Bitcoin roughly.
Okay. I'm gonna have to go mess with the protocol a little bit and stake too, because I remember early when phase 1 opened up, like it was done within, I want to say like within hours. Like it was filled up so quickly.
Yeah, no, it was 1 hour. It was 1 hour.
Well, yeah, within an hour.
6 block. Six block.
Jeez. Yeah. See,
but the initial cap was very small. The initial cap was very small. It was 1,000 Bitcoin.
Okay. Yeah, I remember it was so exciting. And oh yeah, you know what? Actually, I have it in my notes here. The second cap also filled up in like an hour and a half. As soon as it opened, people were waiting to stake. And I want to say forgive my memory lapse. Was there like a gas war when people were trying to stake? Did you see any like crazy rates that people were paying to try to get in under the cap?
In the first cap, the transaction fees went up 100x. The Bitcoin transaction fee went up 100x during the 6 blocks that our cap was open. And in fact, a lot of people complaining about that. And so in the second cap, we changed the method. And instead of opening, we did something different. Oh, yes. we increased the size. Yes, we increased the cap on the size of each transaction so that people can stick more for a transaction, and that reduces the congestion a lot.
Gotcha. Okay, so the first cap was a limit on how much they could stake per transaction.
Yeah, that's right. We did not know the
Gotcha.
demand was so high. We did not know
Yeah.
the demand was so high, and so we want to make the transaction smaller because that cap was mainly a security cap. In other words, we just want to be
Yeah,
super
like spam
conservative
protection.
about everything. No, it's not
Yeah.
stamp protection. It's just that we don't want to make the transactions too big, and we want to diversify all the transactions. And I think it was 0.05 Bitcoin per transaction. But then we didn't realize that the
Okay.
demand was so high that people just keep on pushing these transactions in the first few blocks. And yeah, so the Bitcoin
Just
miners were quite happy. In fact,
I bet.
they sent us a message in the middle of the cap opening, thanking us for our effort. In fact, some people think that, hey, Babylon, you guys are evil. You guys are charging all these transaction fees and stealing all our money because of and you intentionally did this. But they did not know. So people are still not used to this concept that Bitcoin is an entirely decentralized network.
Yeah.
Nobody can control the transaction fees. Nobody can take the transaction fees. They all go to the miners. And so that was kind of funny that how people
That's
are not really
hilarious.
that used to interacting with the Bitcoin chain. Otherwise,
Like
they would not make such stupid comments like this one.
yeah, I mean people are most people in the space today started with like Ethereum and EVM chains and things that came out in the past few years. So even I mean, I'll be honest, even me when I'm using Bitcoin, it's very different. Like I kind of have to get my bearings right every time, and like I know I'm paying in Sats, and like there are some more unique and rare Sats that I have on my wallet that I don't want to lose, so I have to use the right wallet. Like it's just not the best user experience,
UI,
especially when
yeah,
you're
not the
trying to
best
when
UX,
you're
yeah.
trying to do all these different things. But I get it. Like I completely understand. Like we want to make things easier to use, but we also want to keep it decentralized. And so trying to find that middle ground is very difficult. And a lot of people that are in the space that got in here over the past few years, even like myself, I think I started professionally in 2019 or 2020. And so I started with Ethereum, Polygon, like, some of the EVM chains. And so Bitcoin was like my second, third, fourth blockchain that I messed with. It wasn't my first. And so starting to use it, I was like, wait, this is more complicated. And I have to actually like learn a little bit before I get into the Bitcoin ecosystem. And it's like Babylon kind of makes that a little bit easier for people to get involved and buy Bitcoin and put it to work without really having to learn about a whole new ecosystem. It's a very like simple process.
Yeah,
But
so in fact, we have to keep on warning people to be careful on
yeah,
sending the Bitcoin because it turns out that if you send a bit from a UTXO address which has some connection with ore nodes, then you may destroy
yeah,
your ore nodes while doing this Bitcoin staking transaction. And
Mhm.
so you're right. Actually, building on Bitcoin is rather challenging because of all these UX reasons. It's just
yeah.
the lack of tooling around the Bitcoin ecosystem that makes building on Bitcoin rather challenging. And I guess we are part of the effort to try and change that.
That's I mean, I guess we all kind of need that, right? I've spoken to a few different teams that are building on Bitcoin. We've worked with BitLayer, we worked with Stacks that has their own methodology behind it, Botanics, and I mean, obviously Babylon is probably one of the most well known right now in the space in terms of building on Bitcoin and really using Bitcoin for other uses. So I guess my question is, when you saw this interest blow up, even in like the first cap, you like you said, you got messages from people thinking that you guys are charging, higher fees, but it's actually just a congestion of the chain that made everybody have to pay higher rates.
Yeah, I
Did you
think.
see? Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize. Actually, I think this accusation or this complaint about charging higher fees, right, misses one very important point of the protocol, which I'd like to emphasize for your audience, which is sort of the crux of what we're doing here, which is that we are not creating a new intermediary between the user to use. We are just designing a protocol to facilitate the user to interact with the Bitcoin chain directly. And so therefore, they think that somehow they're sending these funds to Babylon, and Babylon takes a cut of the transaction fee and then somehow move it forward to Bitcoin. Then this is not the right imagery at all, because we are only creating a UI, a staking dashboard, to facilitate people to stick to Bitcoin. In fact, anybody can directly stick to Bitcoin by directly sending their own transaction to the Bitcoin chain. In fact, there are people who did that. Command line, CLI, to do that. So I think that is a very important ethos of the project, which is that no intermediary between Bitcoin and the user.
So you're making it easier for people to just interact directly with the Bitcoin network. You're not actually a middleman in that process. You're just providing the rails for people to do it. That's right. That's how you explain it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That also makes sense why people trust it and why that interest was so high. Because everybody knows Bitcoin has been kind of sitting idle for a long time. A lot of holders, longtime believers in Bitcoin, don't want to take risks. That's why they bought into Bitcoin, and that's why they continue to hold Bitcoin. And a lot of them aren't interested in ordinals and runes and BRC20s and other things being built on Bitcoin. They like the core value of Bitcoin, and that's what they got into it for, and that's what they're going to hold on to it for the long term. And it seems like Babylon just kind of unlocked something there that had a lot higher interest than I think a lot of people in the industry expected. Everybody knows that Bitcoin has been sitting there idle for a long time.
Expected. To be honest, higher than what we expected ourselves.
And did you see a lot of diversity? And I know in the beginning there's a lot of people, because you had the cap, it was harder to tell who was staking how much because they were all doing it in smaller chunks. Now that it's opened, do you see any sort of hotspots in whether it's whales that are more interested in staking, whether it's smaller holders, or is it fairly evenly distributed between Bitcoin holders?
Yeah, so we looked at some data, and what we found is that most of the stakers are actually staking at very low minimal, 0.005 Bitcoin.
Okay.
But then there are a small number of stakers which are staking a very large amount. And in some of them are so-called LSTs, liquid staking token projects. These guys, they have the customers, they stake on behalf of the customer to Babylon, and they create a minted version of Bitcoin for their customers to use on other blockchains. So that occupies as a good fraction. And then there are others large stakers, which directly stake to the Babylon protocol without going through these LSTs. So give you an example. So this was back in December. This was the third cap. It was near the end of the third cap. I woke up in the morning and suddenly I see 10,000 more Bitcoin on the staking dashboard. 10,000. All zeros.
It's a big jump.
And I thought that maybe there's something wrong with our dashboard. Maybe the data is not recorded displayed properly. So I immediately called engineers and they what's happening, something wrong with these numbers. Last time when I went to sleep, it was 40,000. Now it's 50,000. What's going on? Turn out that there's one staker that staked 10,000 Bitcoin all in one go. 3 transactions: 5,000, 3,000, 2,000. Yeah, so that's a direct staker. To this day, we still don't know who this staker is. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing.
Wow.
And the staker is still staking right now on the protocol.
Still staking.
Yep.
Wow. Who do you, if you just could take a wild guess, who do you think it could be?
Yeah, we actually, of course, being nosy people, we actually did some investigation and talked to various people, try to squeeze some information out of them.
Yeah.
We have some candidates that we had in mind, and we sort of try to broach it with them, but turns out doesn't seem to be them. So right now we have no viable guess at this moment.
Wow. I'm going straight for like Michael Saylor, you know. I don't know who has that like high holdings. Um I don't know, maybe it's Tesla.
Yeah,
They're
so
they're still
the
supposed to be
interesting
holding
thing
their
is
Bitcoin.
that the interesting thing is that before 10,000 Bitcoin transaction, there was a test transaction just to test the system, just like what we do, right? Whenever we do something new, we have a test transaction. Well, this test transaction was 1 Bitcoin.
That's still a pretty decent sized test transaction.
one
I'm
Bitcoin
expecting it to be like,
is a
yeah,
test.
0.05, 0.5.
Well, one
But like,
one Bitcoin is a test transaction, so we find it a little bit funny. Okay.
that's hilarious. I mean, there's obviously some trust going into it if you're testing it with one full Bitcoin. But also if you have 10,000 Bitcoin just laying around for you to stake, then like maybe it's pocket change. Who knows? I really want to figure out who this person is now. I'm gonna go to the Arkham dashboard and open up a bounty to see if somebody can run an investigation and tell me who this person is.
But I think that was sort of an evidence of that when you build a trustless protocol,
Mm-hmm.
then it's of high value to some people, really high value, because they
It
know that
is.
they're not sending to the Babylon Foundation. They know that they're not sending the 10,000 Bitcoin to the Babylon Foundation or whatever.
Yeah. That's, I mean, honestly, that really speaks to the fact that Babylon is opening up the floodgates for those like hardcore Bitcoin believers, the people that, like I said, the core ethos of Bitcoin, of keeping it actually decentralized and your keys, your crypto, and making sure that you're in control of it. There's so many ways that people have tried to use like wrapped Bitcoin and like use Bitcoin in other ecosystems in other ways, that like the majority of Bitcoin has still stayed pretty quiet. They're just waiting. They've been waiting for years and years and years. And to see, like you said, I mean, 50,000 Bitcoin staked through Babylon, like that speaks for itself. The economics of that speak for themselves. You don't really have to market it and pump the excitement of Babylon. It's Bitcoin holders that are truly like trusting and excited about this new protocol and putting their Bitcoin to some good use. And that speaks for itself. It speaks volumes. So I know like maybe it sounds like more of a sales pitch, but genuinely that makes me really excited to see that kind of difference coming into the ecosystem where you're unlocking trust in a group of people that are very hard to build trust with, right? And so if you built a protocol that allows them to actually use their Bitcoin while sticking to their core values, like that's insane. And I'm excited to see where this goes. Now I'm gonna ask you a little bit of a hot take question. And again, you're more than welcome to not answer it or spin the question a little bit, if you feel comfortable. But my question is, with using Bitcoin to secure point of stake chains, if Bitcoin is the one securing it anyways, then what happens to like proof of stake tokens? Does that, at some point, do you see a point where they're not really necessary anymore? If you can just build another ecosystem, another chain, and you can secure it with Bitcoin, then is there a potential future where these proof of stake tokens don't really have as much need,
Mhm.
necessity, or value?
Well, let's go through some thought experiment. Bitcoin is not used to secure the Bitcoin chain, right?
No, it's the work that's yeah,
The work is secure proof of
the
Bitcoin
compute.
chain. But is there value in Bitcoin, the asset?
Yes.
Okay, so you now apply the same logic. The logic seems to be that the value of an asset is not because it can be used for security.
Okay. That's a very simple and elegant answer to the question. I guess
Right?
maybe in my head it lowers. Yeah.
The value of an asset really is to be able to facilitate the economy of the chain, right? It is a tokenomics tool to facilitate, to bootstrap the economy of a chain. In fact, using it as a security asset purely could be a rather expensive way of using, may not be the optimal way of using the asset. And so what Bitcoin staking allows is the flexibility of improving, in some sense, the tokenomics of the chain. More degrees of freedom now. You can use part of the asset to secure the chain, but you can rely on Bitcoin to secure the rest. And now you have more degrees of freedom of using your asset.
That's actually a very great way of phrasing it. Okay, that makes sense. In my head, it kind of just always goes back to it's providing economic security, like an economic layer of security, and that's being powered by Bitcoin. But that doesn't necessarily take away the intrinsic value of the other assets within that chain or within that ecosystem. It just kind of maybe changes how they're used depending on the ecosystem you're looking at. So yeah, no, thank you. That was actually a great way to make a hot take not so hot of a take and give a very logical, cool-headed answer. So I appreciate
you're
that.
You're talking to professor here, so I think that's the.
You know what? This is my first interview with the professor.
Hot.
Maybe that's why.
The professor's not very hot. It's not very hot.
I mean, it's very logical, man. We need a lot more of that in this industry. We need less people that jump onto any random hot take just for the clicks. And we need to have like real, logical, educated conversations about this stuff. So I appreciate you bringing it down to earth and being like, that's really not that hot of a take, because it doesn't really take all the value away from another asset, which makes perfect sense. Okay, so in that being said, so proof of stake ecosystems and assets still have a future. They still have value. Since you killed my hot take and poured water all over it, let me ask you, what is your future vision for where this ecosystem is headed? Whether that's the future of how people are utilizing Bitcoin, how people are utilizing protocols like Babylon, or how this is going to change the landscape for newer and up and coming Web3 protocols, proof of stake chains. We see new chains launching every day. How do you see like the future vision of this next 5 to 10 years? And what do you really see changing in terms of like the user experience?
So someone said, right, prediction is hard, especially the future. And so I'm completely subscribed to that. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I guess I'm a very lousy predictor because, for example, I could not even expect the amount staked on a protocol. It was rather hard to predict. So that was only a few months ago, and I couldn't predict that even. So I would not venture to predict further. However, I would like to see our effort of allowing Bitcoiners to stake, to secure proof of stake chain as a first step in this process of connecting the Bitcoin world and the proof of stake world, which makes up the two halves of the crypto economy. I would like to see this as a first step and hopefully not the only step. But I think this is a pretty good first step. And the reason is because staking is inherently a very trust minimizing, a very trustless activity. In any proof of stake ecosystem, staking the native asset, is considered as sort of one of the most lowest trust or lowest risk endeavor of the using of this asset. And so we've been endowed Bitcoiners with this ability to stake. Hopefully will be a good first step for them to take to connect to the proof of stake economy. And after this first step is taken, perhaps they will take also other steps as well. And if 10 years later, we'll see a much more integrated economy between Bitcoin and proof of stake, then we can claim some credit as one of the projects who took this very first step. And of course, ideally, we would be also taking the second and third and fourth step as well.
Okay.
But at least we took the first step.
Dude, that's a great way of putting it. And I think it's a big thing. Like I said earlier too, when I joined into this industry, it was very EVM based. Started with Ethereum and Polygon, and those were really like Polkadot was still early. And so for me,
Right.
Bitcoin was not my first or second or even third ecosystem. So we have a new wave of people that have been joining crypto and blockchain and just like the overarching Web3 industry that have really seen, like, we look at Bitcoin as a completely independent ecosystem. It's very different from all of the smart contract supporting blockchains. And so I think you make a very, very important, distinction here, which is, even though these are part of the same umbrella of blockchains, we're really disconnected. A lot of the EVM and the smart contract platforms are still a little bit more connected in the quote unquote multi-chain world. Whereas Bitcoin has kind of been siloed in its own world because it's proof of work, because it doesn't support smart contracts. There's a handful of different reasons. And so connecting those two, and Babylon really being one of the first in this space to connect them in a really valuable way, I think is very important first step. And we'll slowly see steps 2, 3, and 4, reveal themselves over the next few years. And yeah, like you said, it's really hard to predict how that's going to happen, when that's going to happen, what it's going to look like. But we're definitely excited to be. I'm excited to be a part of it, and just to be witness to see this new phase and where we're headed. Okay, then I have one more question for you. Since you are more research focused, you said you started with telecom research back in the day. You were part of your research helped pioneer the telecom industry today, and every cell phone that people use has a little piece of your research in it. And now you're helping pioneer the convergence of Bitcoin and proof of work ecosystems with proof of stake ecosystems. Do you have any sort of vision of like another topic, another industry, another vertical that you find interesting, that you think is going to be good to research and learn more about, that will kind of take more mind share over the coming few years? Like, what is that next tech or the next frontier that's interesting to you that you would like to learn about and research?
Yeah. So right now, my mind space, brain space, whatever you call it, is really focused on this question, right? Which is, the overarching goal is to connect Bitcoin with proof of stake. That's our project. Okay. But to make
Mm-hmm.
that happen, we need to build a lot of technology which enable Bitcoin to interact with the rest of the world, even though it doesn't have smart contract.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that will require a lot of research in cryptography. And in fact, a lot of the research also connects back to my roots in communication. So I should say a few words to the audience, which is actually my roots came from this area called information theory. So there was this guy, you know this AI agent or AI chatbot called Claude. You know Claude?
I love it. Yeah.
You love Claude, right? So do you know who Claude is named after? Do you know why is it called Claude?
Is it Claude Shannon, I want to say?
That's right. That's right. Claude
Yeah.
Shannon. So Claude Shannon is the father of information theory. And I'm proud to say
Okay.
I'm actually the grand student. I'm a grand student of Claude Shannon. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't name,
Okay.
unfortunately, they didn't name the AI chatbot after me, David. But anyway, they named after my granddad. Okay, so that's at least one leg up.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
and it
crazy.
turns out that information theory is my root, and information theory is really to understand how information can be transferred from one place to another place. And you think about Bitcoin, we need that research. And the reason is because Bitcoin is like a very thick person, okay? It doesn't understand much. So it's very hard to squeeze information into Bitcoin to tell him about the rest of the world. And so my current research is sort of bring back my roots information theory, which I, by the way, applied to do all these innovation in cell phones technology that you mentioned
Hmm.
to Bitcoin as well. So my dream is kind of like combining my old love, information theory, with my new
Yeah.
love. It's always
So,
good to have your loves all together and in one big happy family.
dude, that's you know what? I'm really excited to see that future and where that leads. I'm gonna keep up with your research and see
Yeah,
where you take us, man. Okay, honestly, I think we'll cut it off there. This was such an amazing interview, David. Thank you so much for your time, for all your
yeah,
information.
great, very
Um,
enjoyable.
I would love
Paris.
to have this again. Yeah, I'm gonna dive deep and learn a little bit more, so that next time I can give you some more curveball questions and really put you on the spot.
Okay.
But thank you so much for being here. If you
Yep.
don't mind, before we hop off, if you can tell our audience where to find you, where to find more information about the Babylon Protocol, and anything else that you want to share before we sign off.
Yeah. You can go on Twitter and you'll find me on Twitter. What is my handle? DNTSE, I believe that was my handle. But you can search for me, David TSE anyway.
Okay.
Babylon website is babylonlabs.io. And that's the website where you can find all the data. And you can also go through from there to the Bitcoin staking dashboard. And anybody can stake. Anybody who has Bitcoin can stake. Doesn't matter how much. 0.005 Bitcoin is the minimum amount, which is about $500.
Easy peasy. Awesome. All right. So David Tse on X. You can go to Babylon Protocol, or you said babylonlabs.io, and then Babylon
BabylonLabs.io,
also on
correct?
X, right? Okay.
No, it's
Awesome.
Babylon Labs on X. Yes. Thank you.
All right. David, thank you again so much for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I hopefully we'll do the next interview in person. I'll come over to Stanford and we'll have an interview on campus with you.
Oh yeah, that's right. You could have come over to do this visit in person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll do one in the coming weeks. You're not too far from me, so I'll hop over on the
Got it.
bridge and I'll see you. Awesome. Thank you, man. We'll chat
Bye,
with you next time.
bye. Yep.
Thanks. Bye bye.